Welcome to this lecture on MOS, the Mini One-Stop Shop, which is coming in from the 1st of January 15. My name's Dean Wootton. Now, before we look at the details of MOS, it's worth going through a few fundamentals on international services. Now, the first point I want to make is that the place of supply is the key issue when dealing with international services. The basic rules, which we always consider first, are within Article 44, and that's business-to-business supplies of services, B2B as they become known, and the place of supply for B2B services is where the customer belongs. I'll look at an example of that in just a moment. Now, the other basic rule is Article 45, business-to-consumer services. Now, this has become known as B2C, and the place of supply for B2C services are where the supplier belongs. Now, there are various exceptions to the basic rules, and these are set out in the Directive, Articles 46 through to 59b. And it's one of these overrides that has prompted MOS, which we'll come to very, very shortly. Let's have a look at an example of a B2B supply. So here we have a German consultant providing services to a UK company. Now, Article 44 treats this as a B2B supply, so the place of supply is in the UK. Now, that means the supply is outside the scope of German VAT, so no German VAT on that supply. What indeed does happen is that Article 196 of the Directive states that there must be a reverse charge obligation on the UK company. Now, what is this reverse charge obligation? Well, reverse charge is that the recipient, in this case the UK company, must account for output VAT on their purchase. Now, that is the Article 196 reverse charge. Now, as they're paying output tax over, so they're paying output tax to the government, it must also be their input tax. So they can recover the output tax they've accounted for, providing, of course, they are a fully taxable UK company. So the reverse charge is simply accounting for output tax, effectively the German consultant's output tax, and then seeing if you can recover that as input tax. Now, it's very important that the German consultant identifies this as a B2B supply, so obtain proof of the business status of the UK company. Some member states insist on VAT numbers for proof, others are more relaxed and it's just general proof of business status. But VAT numbers would be solid proof of business. Now, just one or two more points to make on this. On that German consultant, they've raised this invoice which they're not going to charge German VAT on. But that invoice must contain the reverse charge narrative. Effectively, it's got to put the UK co on notice that this is a reverse charge service and they must reverse charge, or at least consider the reverse charge in their own member state. The German consultant must also report their service on their recapitulative statement. In the UK, this is called an EC sales list, but has different names in other member states. So they've just got to report the fact that they've raised a B2B invoice for services to a company in another member state, a registered company in another member state. Let's have a look at the impact of reverse charge, and then we can understand why they're around. Well, the German consultant is going to raise a bill for £20,000. He'll raise it in euros, but let's just deal with sterling for this example. So £20,000 has been raised to the UK company. The UK company is partially exempt. They are 50% taxable and 50% exempt. Now, when the UK company buys in services from a German consultant, they are triggering a Article 196 reverse charge. Now, that means that the UK co must account for output tax of £4,000. That's £20,000 times the UK VAT rate of 20%. They would then recover half that, so 50% recovery, so £2,000. That will mean they've got to pay £2,000 to the UK government, to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Now, this means that the German consultant will cost the UK company £22,000. That's £20,000 paid direct to the consultant, plus £2,000 paid to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs via the UK company's VAT return. So £22,000 cost if they use a German consultant. Now let's say that company was to use a UK consultant. The UK consultant would charge them £20,000 plus £4,000 VAT, and the UK company would then recover half that VAT charged, so 50% recovery, £2,000. Now that means the UK consultant has cost the UK company £22,000. That's £24,000 paid to the consultant, less £2,000 recovered from Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs via the UK company's VAT return. So there you see the point of a reverse charge. The reverse charge is just to make the overseas supplier the same cost as a local supplier. So reverse charge, that's the impact of it. That is the only reason for it being there. They do not want there to be a VAT reason for choosing your service providers. So let's look at an example of a B2C. Now here we have a UK company, they've got a website and they're offering e-books on their website, so electronic books. A Danish individual comes to their website and looks to download one of their books. Now that's an Article 45 B2C supply. The place of supply is the UK and UK VAT is due. So the UK company will be charging 20% UK VAT on that e-book. Now if the VAT rates in Europe were fundamentally the same, this wouldn't be a problem. But the VAT rates in Europe vary from 15% in Luxembourg to 27% in Hungary. So you can see there the variety of rates that you're going to pay when you download services is quite wide, so 15 to 27%, depending on which member state you're downloading from. Now it's actually wider than that, because the 15 to 27%, that's the standard rate. Some countries offer the reduced rate, their reduced rate, on certain electronic services. E-books is a classic one. For example, in Luxembourg, the e-book rate of that is 3%. Now that is because in Luxembourg they classify an electronic book the same as a hard copy book. So the electronic books get the same rate as hard copy books, and the rate in hard copy books in Luxembourg will be 3%. So e-books come with this very, very low VAT rate, 3%. If you compare that to the UK, in the UK the VAT rate on hard copy books is 0%, whereas the rate on electronic books is 20%. So that's why when you go to download a Kindle book, for example, from Amazon, and you note who you're downloading from when you go through the invoice process, you're downloading from a company called Amazon Media EU, SARL. Now that is a Luxembourg company. Now that is because e-books, when they're downloading from Luxembourg, they are at 3%. Now I'm not saying you're going to get your Joe Nesbo book any cheaper as an individual if you go to Luxembourg. It might be a bit cheaper, but the real advantage for these lower rates is it attracts suppliers. So Luxembourg get a lot of business from the likes of Amazon, Apple, etc., iBooks, because there's this really attractive VAT rate over there. So a lot of businesses would establish themselves in Luxembourg to take advantage of these rates. And that puts the rest of Europe at a bit of a disadvantage. And that's partly why these rules are changing from the 1st of January 15. So we'll get onto that in just a moment. Now, before we do, I'd just like to comment on the non-EU individuals who may go to a UK company. Now, when you got this non-EU individual, initially, that's a B2C supply, Article 45 again. But there's an Article 59 override which shifts the place of supply from the UK, B2C, to where the recipient belongs, so outside the UK. Now that means the UK company would not charge any VAT to a non-EU individual. And that is because of Article 59. Essentially, VAT is a European-based tax. So let's try and summarise this. Luxembourg is a very attractive member state to establish your business, your electronic business from. So let's say we establish ourselves in Luxembourg and we download music to, let's say, Hungarian individuals. Now again, this is an Article 45 supply, standard rates of VAT in Luxembourg 15%, so that would come with a 15% VAT charge. If this was e-books, it would come with a 3% VAT charge. Now the Hungarian VAT rate is 27%, so that's a big difference. The Hungarian individuals are enjoying services which have had a much lower VAT rate accounted for on them. Now, it's not to say you'll get the advantage of that VAT rate as a Hungarian individual, but it's the supplier attraction, the fact that Luxembourg is a magnet for these types of businesses. It is very easy for businesses just to establish themselves in Luxembourg, and if they're electronic downloads, even telecommunications broadcasting, very easy to establish yourself in a member state because your customer base is extremely wide because of the very nature of what you're supplying. Telecommunications, broadcasting, and most importantly, electronic services. So that's why from the 1st of January 15 there are changes to these rules. It will be changing from a supplier-based rule to a customer-based rule. Now this, I won't say unfairness, but this discrepancy in equal competition or fairness of competition has prompted changes from the 1st of January 2015. Now, the place of supply of all B2C telecommunications, broadcasting and electronic services changes to where the customer resides. Article 58 will be amended. Prior to the 1st of January 15, Article 58 only covered non-EU suppliers. Yet from the 1st of January 15, all B2C suppliers of telecommunications, broadcasting, electronically supplied services, the place of supply is where the customer resides. So if we go back to that Luxembourg code billing a Hungarian individual, and from the 1st of January 2015, the Luxembourg code is making a Hungarian supply. So prior to the 1st of January 15, this was an Article 45 B2C supply, place of supply in Luxembourg. That would come with a 15% VAT charge prior to the 1st of Jan 15. After the 1st of Jan 15, Article 58 is amended, and this shifts the place of supply from where the supplier belongs to where the customer resides. So the place of supply moves to Hungary. Now this results in a Hungarian VAT registration for the Luxembourg Co, so they can charge and account for 27% Hungarian VAT. Now, as you can see, this will create multiple EU registration obligations. It's highly unlikely that it'll just be downloading into one member state. So you'll have multiple EU registration obligations. If I consider a UK company, let's say they've got an online games website, so you download games from their website, and they're downloading to Swedish individuals, Hungarian individuals, Romanian individuals, UK individuals, so lots of individuals. Now, from the 1st of January 2015, UK Co will have multiple EU registration obligations in each member state. Now, they would have to do that to be able to charge the local VAT rate. The local VAT rate in Sweden is 25%. UK Co must charge 25% on the Swedish downloads. The Hungarian VAT rate 27, so 27% VAT is due. Romania 24% VAT rate is due. 20% in the UK, that's alright, so they'll be charging that anyways. But it's those other countries, Sweden, Hungary, Romania, where they have to be registered. Now there is a saving grace on this. There is an EU-wide simplification known as the Mini One-Stop Shop, abbreviated to MOS, and that's available to ease the registration burden. Now MOS has two schemes. There's the union scheme for EU suppliers, and there's the non-union scheme for non-EU suppliers. Let's have a look what MOS actually is, and we'll consider the union scheme first. Now, the union scheme is found within Article 369A through to K, and this is best shown by looking at the UK Co's obligation on the previous screen. Now, the UK Co will still have to prepare their UK VAT return. Their UK VAT return will have their UK sales on it, and it'll have their UK input tax on it. So they still account for their domestic supplies on their own VAT return. Now, in addition to their own VAT return, they'll have to submit a MOS return. Now, this MOS return is in the UK, so it's via the HMRC portal in the UK, as it will be in all member states via the government portal. for online submissions. Now this MOS return will record all their EU sales. This MOS return is completed in the national currency, and if it's different, say if you're billing in euros for example and your national currency is say sterling, then you convert from euros into the national currency. You can use a daily conversion rate or the last day of the quarter exchange rate. So this UKCo, they are UK VAT registered. They are also UK MOS registered. You have to separately register for MOS. So they are UK registered, MOS registered, they've got a UK return, and they've also got a MOS return. Now these MOS returns are calendar quarter electronic returns. The return and payment are due within 20 days of the end of the quarter. And behind the scenes, VAT is being distributed post-submission to the relevant member states. So the French VAT charged and accounted for will find its way through to France after the governments deduct I wouldn't say commission, but they deduct a charge before they remit to the different member states. But the French VAT charged, most of it will get its way to the French authorities. Now, if the UK company were to incur EU VAT, not likely, but they might have a salesperson go over to one of the member states, stay at a hotel, hire a car, etc. So they might incur some EU VAT. Now, if they do incur some EU VAT, they cannot recover that on their UK return, because that's only UK VAT. They cannot recover it on their MOS return, because that's only output tax. It's broken up into the 28 different member states, and it's just output tax. So there's no input tax facility on the MOS return. The only way you're going to get back the EU VAT incurred is by submitting a cross-border refund claim. Now this is under Article 170 of Directive 2008/9/EC. Now that is just a simple cross-border refund claim submitted via the government portal. So you can see here that UKCo has 3 returns. Definitely a UK return, definitely a MOS return. If they incur some EU VAT and they want to recover it, they've got to submit the cross-border refund claim. Well, let's now have a look at the non-EU suppliers, and we'll move into the non-union scheme. Now here we have a USco, and they're downloading games to French individuals, German individuals and UK individuals. Pre-1st of January 15, Article 58 stated that electronic services from a non-EU supplier to EU individuals are supplied where the customer belongs. Now that meant that non-EU suppliers had multiple EU registration obligations before the 1st of January 15, and they will continue to have such obligations post-January 15, when Article 58 is amended to cover EU and non-EU suppliers. So the rule for non-EU suppliers hasn't really changed. They had multiple EU registration obligations before Jan 15, and they will continue to have them after Jan 15. The main impact of the changes are to EU suppliers of these services. So to continue with that non-EU supplier, well, they can use after Jan 15 the MOS non-union scheme. Now prior to 1st of Jan 15, the non-EU supplier could choose to register in one member state, but they still had to charge the local VAT rate, so French VAT to French individuals, Hungarian VAT to Hungarian individuals. And Article 358 through to 369 provide the detail of that simplification. Now from the 1st of January 15, the non-union MOS scheme supersedes the old system. It's essentially the same for non-EU suppliers, but they do it via the MOS system. So they register in a member state of their choosing, and they would then account for the local VAT, so still French VAT, the French individuals, etc. And that's really the main difference between the non-union scheme and the union scheme. The non-union scheme is for non-union suppliers, and they can choose which member state they register under MOS in. If you're registering under the union scheme, so let's say a UK company, then they have to register under MOS in the UK. They can't be based in the UK and choose to register under MOS in, say, Italy. They've got to register under MOS in their own member state, i.e. where they are established. Well, that concludes the lecture on MOS. My name's Dean Wootton. Thank you for listening.